Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Refocus webinar series. My name is Ashley Hood-Morley. I'm the Senior Director of Sustainability and Materials at the Plastics Industry Association. And I'm really happy to be moderating today's session alongside my colleague, Plastics Vice President of Government Affairs, Matt Seaholm. Today, we're going to be talking about recycling policy, and we have a couple of guest speakers here with us today. But just before we dive in, I have just a couple of very brief housekeeping items to cover with you. So first and foremost, this being our last episode in the 2020 Refocus webinar series, I just want to express my sincere gratitude once again to our sponsors, Midland Compounding and Consulting, Plastics Machinery Magazine, Plastics Recycling, and Star Plastics. You know, these folks, again, have been very gracious in shifting their support and trusting us to carry off this webinar series in the new virtual event format for the first time. So we thank them, we appreciate them, and we are hope that you are sitting at home giving them a virtual round of applause and are thankful and grateful to them for allowing this webinar series to be brought to you this year with no registration fee. Just a quick thank you also to our media partners who help us get the word out about Refocus each year. So we have Mold Making Technology, Plastics Machinery Magazine, Plastics News, Plastics Technology, and Recycling Today. So we appreciate all the work that they put in putting together articles and helping us each year as well. Quickly, so although all attendees' lines are currently muted, we absolutely will offer a Q&A session as part of today's program. So as always with our webinar series, throughout the webinar at any time, there is a Q&A box on your Zoom platform. Feel free to throw in questions there at any point. And if you have a specific person on the line that you'd like to direct those to, just make note of that when you're sending in your question. We'll do our best. We have a full conversation plan for you today. We'll do our best to hit as many questions as possible, but I do also promise to, if we don't get to your questions, I'm happy to pull those together and share those with our speakers after the webinar, and they are happy to, do any kind of follow-up post-event. So keep in mind when you are posing the questions that we will still abide by the association's antitrust policy. So we're not going to answer any questions that would get into the realm of pricing, production, or marketing strategies today. So this is a public education session. We have members, non-members, and press may be present. So we won't be conducting any official business of the association today, and just keep in mind that this session is being recorded. It will be made available to attendees after the conclusion of the webinar. We'll send out a post-event survey, and at the end of that survey, you will be granted access to view the recording if you wish. So without further ado, try to keep those opening remarks as brief as possible. We want to dive right in to the exciting conversation that we have today. I am really pleased to be able to bring to you the sixth and final episode that we're calling Leading Bipartisan Solutions for Recycling in Congress. And today we're so happy to have with us Amcor, a plastics member company, as well as Representative Haley Stevens. So without further ado, I would like to bring on Amcor's Global Vice President of Sustainability, David Clark. So welcome, David, to today's virtual stage. And I'm going to turn it over to David to introduce our guest.
Thanks, Ashley, and hello, everyone. Amcor is a manufacturer of plastic packaging. And when the issue of plastic waste started rising in importance a few years ago, we started looking at solutions. And wherever we looked in different parts of the world, wherever we found effective recycling systems, processing technologies, and markets for recycled materials, we also found sound government policy and a framework of regulations and funding to support sustainable production, innovation, and waste management. And that's why I'm excited today to be introducing Congresswoman Haley Stevens to talk about the Plastic Waste Reduction and Recycling Act. Congresswoman Stevens grew up in Rochester Hills, Michigan, and graduated from Seaholm High School in Birmingham. She earned a master's degree in social policy and philosophy and a bachelor's degree in political science and philosophy from American University. Before being elected to Congress, Congresswoman Stevens served as the Chief of Staff to the U.S. Auto Rescue Task Force, the federal initiative responsible for saving General Motors, Chrysler, and 200,000 Michigan jobs. She also played a key role in setting up the Office of Recovery for Automotive Communities and Workers and the White House Office for Manufacturing Policy. After serving in the Obama administration, Congresswoman Stevens worked in a manufacturing research lab focused on the future of work in the digital age. Congresswoman Stevens sits on the House Committee for Education and Labor and the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, where she also serves as chairwoman of the Research and Technology Subcommittee, which sounds really cool to me. And on these committees, Congresswoman Stevens works to protect access to healthcare, promote manufacturing, expand education opportunities, and stand up for workers' rights and increase investment in critical research and development. Congresswoman Stevens resides in Rochester Hills, Michigan, and attends Kensington Church in Troy. So welcome, Congresswoman Stevens.
Thank you so much, David, and to the entire association. I really want to give you all a lot of credit for holding these webinars in these new times that we're in part because we need to continue to foster these types of dialogues. We need to have these conversations and discussions about what's taking place in terms of research and development, technology opportunities, innovation. I greatly appreciate the introduction in which you mentioned the work that I'm doing on the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. You better believe in my first term in Congress, I got a chairmanship of a subcommittee that directly oversees two agencies that frankly motivated my run for Congress. That's the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And one of the things that we are working on this committee that we've been focused on since COVID-19 hit has been the impacts of this pandemic on our innovation capabilities. I come from an area that's rich with manufacturing production, innovations in electric vehicle technology, autonomous vehicle technology, the automotive sector. And you better believe they're all using plastics. and I do this program called Manufacturing Monday. And what that program is that every Monday I'm connecting with a small business, maybe a mid-sized business in some instances through our supply chain, occasionally a training center, but I'm keeping my finger on the pulse of what is driving our regional economy and also establishing relationships with business owners, with the labor force, getting an understanding of the technology. And every time I mention that I helped to create the House Plastic Solutions Task Force and that I am helping to lead a portfolio of work to focus on plastic in the House of Representatives, these individuals' eyes light up. They want to tell me what they're doing with plastic. Obviously for steel, we're looking at reman principles. Plastic's a little bit different, but everyone is feeling a connection and an intersection to our plastics industry and certainly our municipalities as well. I represent a suburban district with really well-run municipalities. It's suburbs, right? So it's about several dozen communities, municipalities who actually came to me very early on in my term. They didn't actually necessarily come to me. We were just having a discussion and it came up that because we woke up in 2018 to some changes, implemented changes from China, that the cost burden of recycling plastics in particular was being pushed back to our municipalities and in turn being pushed back to our taxpayers and to our consumers. And certainly this was also with some of the global cries to make sure that our oceans didn't have plastics dumped into them and that we were properly recycling and reusing plastic. In particular, the recycling opportunities, starting with the standards development to the R&D opportunities to alleviating some of the cost burdens through synthesizing these standards to our municipalities. And so we've got a great piece of legislation in the Congress. Believe it or not, this is bipartisan. This is a bipartisan topic. It's why I talk about manufacturing. If you talk about things that bring people together, then you get those results, right? You get that collaboration and cooperation together to get in front of what seems like a big challenge, but is also really a big opportunity. So our Plastic Waste Reduction and Recycling Act that was introduced this year. We were hoping to introduce it on Earth Day, but given what was going on with the pandemic, we pushed it to May. My Republican co-sponsor, also from the Midwest, is Mr. Anthony Gonzalez from the Cleveland area of Ohio, came into Congress with me in 2018. We introduced this bill mostly to charge the federal government with a holistic approach to tackling and addressing and also seizing hold of the opportunities for recycling in the United States of America. And so first and foremost, we start with directing the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. We've got a little dotted line to that office on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. We're asking them to establish a plastic waste reduction and recycling program that will work through an interagency approach to position the United States leadership in plastic waste reduction. Part of what we saw, right, coming out of this abrupt change in 2018 with China not accepting a lot of our recycled goods is that they had established almost $1 trillion industry in recycling. And I look at this, the home of America's supply chain, and think we have got such a great opportunity to create these jobs here, to invest here, to spur new technologies and new approaches and bring everyone along with us. So if you look at the Plastic Solutions Task Force and who's at the table, well, we've got the private sector, we've got nonprofit, we've got our municipalities at the table. And that's frankly how we've got to approach things. This is called smart policy, not just shooting from the hip and saying, let's ban all plastic straws and that's going to solve our problem. That doesn't really come close, right? Those of you, I know, I'm going to learn from you in the Plastics Industry Association on this, but you know this very well, that plastic touches almost every element of an individual's life. I'm looking at my sanitizer right now, and who'd have thunk it's in a plastic container. I look at the food that I buy, it's in plastic. The car that I drive, the plane that I fly on. And so this is why, again, we've really got to get out of the finger pointing business that sometimes takes place when we talk about recycling, and take not just a whole of government approach, but a whole of stakeholder approach, which is also why I am very honored and delighted to be speaking with you today. And as part of the legislation that we have put forward, the other agencies that we are targeting to be a part of this legislation are the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, to carry out some of the research and provide that metrology base of understanding for how we would do the standards development and the tools and guidelines. This is something that, we've heard from the private sector, that this isn't over-regulation, it's just guidance in terms of how we label, and then on the back end, how we choose to recycle, directing the Department of Energy to support the research and development of new chemical recycling and recyclability by design programs. A lot of opportunity there with the Department of Energy, directing the National Science Foundation, the Environmental Protection Agency, and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to support that research and other activities on advanced recycling technologies, plastic waste reduction and remediation, and the public health impacts of microplastics, among other topics. And then lastly, we're looking to authorize funding for 5 years to invest $85 million in fiscal year 2021 for these activities, authorizing a 6.5% increase over the previous year's authorization, and then going into the following fiscal years. So one, we've got the energy here for this legislation, in part because of how we have been working with our private sector partners, our nonprofit partners, our trade associations, and the work that it took. And I'm, in conclusion, I'm happy to quickly kind of peel behind the curtain here on what it takes to get everyone to come to the table, because the idea came at the beginning of the year, and it took us to the fourth quarter of the year, this was last year, to get the task force established. And now, and the task force is a part of the overall House Recycling Caucus. But part of that, right, was spending the time and building the relationships, going and sitting down together, listening, sharing and exchanging ideas, and building trust. And so, look, we were in the bottom of the Capitol announcing the Plastic Solutions Task Force, and it's not like we had a bunch of press cameras there, but we were doing something that I believe is going to have tremendous impacts, and is also in companionship with what is taking place in the United States Senate. I couldn't believe in my first term in Congress, I get a phone call from, I think it was the Consumer Brand Association, and they said, well, we're having this big symposium over at the Senate. We've got 3 senators speaking, and we'd like to invite you to come as well. And I thought, holy smokes, I just got to Congress and they're having me head over to the Senate. Oh, right, sounds like a plan. But when I got there, I couldn't believe what I saw and heard. One, a room full of partners. 2, senators in attendance from both sides of the aisle, things that I didn't even know that they were thinking about and working on, that I saw that we could pick right back up in the House, that we had the companion bill. This was on cleaning up our oceans and some of the plastic reduction in our oceans. We know that that's an international problem, that that's not just the United States, and we're far from being the United States, dumping into our oceans, but that also the burden that is saddled on our municipalities who are seeking to recycle, the burden on individual consumers who, look to put the recycled goods into the right bin and X, Y, and Z, but fall short because maybe there's materials on the goods that they're recycling, that there's a sorting issue. And this is where the technology comes into play. And this is where we all come together to get in front of this problem. So, and again, I don't like to just say problems. I like to say opportunities. So thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to say I'm ready to geek out with you, because I know I think Matt is going to be moderating the Q&A period, and I'd be delighted to not only just answer your questions, but hear your firsthand experience, or maybe some of the comments and feedback that you have as well.
Yeah, thanks, Representative Stevens. That was a great introduction. I'm really looking forward to the questions as well. But if I can take this opportunity to maybe get in a few of my own. One is you talked really well about, I think, about the benefits of plastics and the contributions of our industry to society, people's health and well-being, especially now with the need for sanitation and protection, and also about the complexity of the issue. And it's great to hear that your proposal is being supported in a bipartisan way. But what are you hearing from? I mean, we call them consumers. You probably hear them call them constituents from the general public who are really concerned about plastic in the environment. And how do they interpret this?
Look, I'll tell you, every time, David, I introduce a little something on plastics, people back home ask for more. They want more. They want to see more. They've got, the big blue sky vision. And look, as I kind of was explaining my district to all of you and representing a suburban district, it's a really close-knit group of people. I mean, these are individuals, some of my towns, right? And they just fold into one another. So again, it's not rural, but I've got, for instance, the city of Plymouth that's under 20,000 people. I've got Canton Township, which is right next door, that's about 100,000 people. You go to a township board meeting, a city council meeting, and they're packed. They're packed because people are weighing in. We've got a dump issue over, again, this is all Western Wayne County, but we've got a dump issue with Northville, the city of Northville, Northville Township. Again, an area of about 100,000 people. And some of this has to do with how the landfill is being treated for some of the smells that are emanating, and I think some of the deals that were brokered between the communities. It's a dual county landfill, and the constituents who live there. And it's not so much that everyone's talking about plastics, but the minute we bring this forward, people have got, right, they've got the ideas, they've got the questions. And the one thing I hear so much, David, anytime I talk to anybody about this, the number one thing I hear is we are looking for the education. I mean, again, I hear this, it doesn't matter. It's not a partisan topic. I don't know who I'm talking to just a room of Democrats, but I'll hear from people, we are looking for the education. And this is where the standards component comes in is so helpful. And then the other thing that I hear that is probably number two when I share what we're working on is, holy smokes, we see job opportunity, we see investment opportunity. And then I get invited to go look at, a company that's forming. There's Quad Cities International, which is located in Livonia, and they take all of the waste, all of the trash waste, and they can turn it into diesel fuel. And, it's like, okay, that was one that just kind of came up from a conversation, but I really do see the investor and business community very energized around these opportunities for what we want to do with recycling in this country.
Yeah, thanks. That's great to hear. And while we're talking about support, as your bill works its way through Congress, what can we as individuals and those listening on the call today do to help get that process moving faster?
Well, let's continue. I love that. Let's continue to work together. Obviously, as we mentioned, we're in a new landscape, and it's already hard to get a meeting with a member of Congress. It's really hard to get a meeting with a member of Congress in a pandemic. Sometimes, right, you don't hear back, but maybe you're doing a couple other meetings on the Hill and you're walking through the hall and, you happen to see so-and-so. And so you're able to have a sidebar conversation. Well, this temporary age of social distancing has really prevented that. And we're seeing some of this stymieing of our legislative function as a result of this pandemic. I mean, even the lobbying I seek to do when I'm casting a vote on the floor of the House, well, no one's hanging out on the floor. We can't. We got to vote and leave. So you kind of look for folks. But one, I would really encourage the holistic approach of reaching out to members outside of the Midwest, but continuing to focus on some of the Midwestern leadership. Part of this is because our Great Lakes area is really going to understand the industrial component of this, the making component. Even going into Kentucky, there's some great recycling initiatives and programs. Members who used to be former mayors or municipal leaders, county elected officials, great to target them because they're going to understand this right away. The Senate, too, continues to be a strategic partner. And I know that you have in the association, harnessed just years of relationships and working with the Senate. And we want to continue to get them talking about this as well. It's a different design there. I've got a nice home over in the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. I held the first hearing on recycling technology in a decade last year, which is great, but I had the ability to do that. Now you start to look at, over in the Senate, well, they're having lots of conversations about lots of different things, but their committee structure is different and the way in which they move. But if we build that energy, and as we approach the 117th session of Congress with the newly elected 46th president of the United States of America, I'm going to guarantee you what's on everyone's mind and what my focus is this term, it's on getting things done. And that means shutting out the partisan noise and coming together to provide opportunity. And this is local, it's cost effective, and it's frankly, it's the steps that we can take on the front end, right? It's not saying let's throw a bunch of money. I mean, I'm always writing the chair of the infrastructure committee here, Pete DeFazio, Congressman DeFazio. I'm trying to say, hey, Pete, we got all these dotted lines between what we're looking on in science that relates to, our broader, infrastructure work. And I start to see these infrastructure packages coming down, and we know we got big dollar needs on infrastructure. It's eye-popping. I mean, here I'm talking about, $85 million over, 5 years. I mean, it's, we got, and you look at NIST, I mean, they're taking, low dollar and doing tremendous ROI with low dollar. And I say it's tremendous because, it's a small team that's starting to look at these standards, that's bringing in the research that was frankly impacting some of the legislation that we took on, John.
I think that's a really important point. It sounds like this bill has a tremendous return on the investment. And it's certainly something that's very important for the plastics industry and those of us who are listening. So thank you very much for your initial remarks. I think there are going to be a lot of questions coming from participants. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ashley and John for the next part of this.
Great. Thank you, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Excellent kickoff, David, Representative Stevens. So my colleague, Matt Seaholm, our Vice President of Government Affairs, has also joined us for the next segment. So we're going to get right into some more Q&A dialogue. So continue to send in those questions through the Q&A portion of Zoom. And we've got some of those lined up already. We're going to kick off focusing on some of the policy questions itself. So Matt, over to you.
Well, good morning, Congresswoman. And I'd be remiss not to say first, congratulations on your reelection. And we're happy that you're coming back into the new session of Congress. I want to start kind of high level and ask you first, you mentioned the Congressional Plastic Solution Task Force. Would love to hear more about how that came together, but then talk a little bit, looking forward. What do you think the focus and priorities are going to be of that group in the new Congress?
Yeah, well, I almost want to start with the second question, but I'll start with the history first. We looked at what was going on in our existing caucuses and just saw some missing pieces. I also saw an opportunity to bring together new types of partners. Frankly, you could look at the Beverage Association, for instance, and I'm not sure how many people are aware or know how much the Beverage Association is working with nonprofit partners like the World Wildlife Foundation, for instance, working with municipalities, setting big goals to reclaim every bottle within the next handful of years, is very self-aware and also willing to be very transparent. The other thing that I saw being in Washington, D.C. is, and I briefly mentioned the plastic straw ban, and I saw that as sort of a local legislation or a local law, I guess you could say. It's, something that the D.C. City Council passed. But while I was taking a look at, gosh, how did we get saddled with this burden of our recycling now that China is no longer taking it? Why were we so over-reliant on China? How were they able to develop such a large industry of scale? And yet I feel like we've missed out here. We've missed out on the R&D and technology application opportunities. We've missed out on the job opportunities. Complex supply chains are something I run at rather than run away from, right? I'm like, let me jump into this. And I started to see all these linkages. And so then the other thing we looked at was, well, if we bring everybody to the table, we can probably do something that doesn't happen that often in Congress, which is taking a true, type of problem solvers, bipartisan approach to this. And so by getting our industry partners, our nonprofit partners, and our municipal partners teed up and ready to help us launch this task force, we were also able to bring in individuals who are very keen to addressing the plastics recycling challenge that we have before us. And we were also able to cover a lot of territory. So you have Schreier, who's Congresswoman Schreier in Washington State, Congressman Murphy from North Carolina, as an example, Congressman Tonko from New York, who's been a longstanding member of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. And so, look, we were able to, right before the world changed, right at the end of 2019, launch this task force, and also with the blessing of the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Frank Pallone, who helps to head up the recycling task force along with Congressman Matt Cartwright. And then I mentioned also that we were working with Congressman Anthony Gonzalez from Ohio. So it's a nice smattering of folks. And then you start to see, when you talk to your friends in industry, that they've got a presence all over. And so that we can really start to take a look at ways in which we can drill down in people's districts very specifically and almost give something to our new members. And I've got, if this is really interesting, Matt, I have people who are coming into Congress, I'm not going to name names because I don't know if they're ready for me to do that, who've said to me, when I shoot off the congratulations text, and they'll say, I'm really excited about your plastics work and I want to get involved. Boom, that's so exciting that has penetrated to some of the newer individuals who are coming into Congress, and how we can continue to build this portfolio of work, which leads to the second part of your question. What are we going to be focusing on this year? Well, one, I think all of you have been a part of this inspiration, which is that we're going to keep dribbling the ball no matter what challenges are thrown at us. Particularly, you just can't deny some of the impacts of a global pandemic. And that the pandemic has potentially impacted some of the pilots, some of the travel work that we were going to do, and the way in which we were even going to hold hearings. Now, lo and behold, in my chairmanship, I've been having hearings the whole time. I didn't know I was like the only one having the bipartisan hearings in the early spring when this pandemic hit, because I thought, well, we've got work to do. So we know for our bill, we need to get it marked up, and we need to build some energy on that. I really appreciate David's good question around that we need to think about, how we can continue to work together to have this conversation. And I left out when David asked, but this is great that you're giving me this time to talk about our agenda for the Plastic Solutions Task Force, which is, this is about education. And you all know that. And I know that, you might kind of, be knocking on a member's door just to have that introductory meeting, just to kind of learn where they're at, but also provide some of the information. And this is really something that we have got to do into this new session of Congress, which is provide the educational platform. So this is an open invitation for us to bring you to the table too, to explain what the industry means, where the industry is focused right now, and start to hone in on some of that solution part together. I'm very sensitive about continuing to stitch that, bring all the stakeholders to the table, because we're almost in this year 2021, and that's just the way you're going to get anything done.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. And I'll kind of build upon the theme of bipartisanship. Obviously, that's part of the title of our presentation today. But I got to say, as a Big Ten graduate, the fact that you were able to work with somebody from Ohio and co-sponsoring, anybody that knows Michigan and Ohio don't always see eye to eye, and especially this time of year. But,
and he played for OSU.
There you go. So, I'm sure you don't talk on Saturdays, but
right.
But sticking with the theme of really working together, I do want to ask you a little bit more about your bill, the Plastic Waste Reduction and Recycling Act. You've been able to get some incredible co-sponsors, including the chairwoman and ranking member of the committee on it this year. Looking at next year, obviously you're going to have to reintroduce it. I'm kind of curious how you see some of the movement that could potentially happen early next year, as well as any potential additions, edits, things that you're kind of looking at that you might be interested in tacking onto the bill.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I'll tell you, I was at something with some of our new members. It was a Zoom, and the question was, what advice do you have for the new members? And I said, join the science committee, in part because I think we're going to have some open seats, but we're going to want to have some of that new energy on the committee to sign on to bills like the one that Mr. Gonzalez and I have, and to also, get us to a place where we can bring this not only through committee, but to the floor of the House of Representatives. And so, look, I have a feeling that we will get there. We're going to do a NIST reauthorization. We're already right now thinking about the hearings that we want to have. You were so spot on to mention the co-sponsors that we have, two very senior members, not only on the committee, but in the body of Congress, who come from, Texas and Oklahoma, respectively, with Chairwoman Johnson and Ranking Member Lucas. And they're going to have some reaches into with Chairwoman Johnson into the Democratic caucus and Ranking Member Lucas into the Republican conference. And so that's some of the thinking in terms of, look, we introduced the bill this year, but reintroducing it into 2021 and actually having the hearing and the platform and the 2 years to be able to get this done. I know that while I'm eager to let the incoming administration get their sea legs and their breathing room, you better believe I'm going to be crawling, and I'm going to be talking to them about a few selective priorities, and this is one of them. And I will say, just very narrowly focused on the work that I've been doing on plastics and with recycling in particular, this current EPA was very easy to work with. And that we saw a lot of things that it's not like I'm sending them dozens of things, but a few of the times when we really reached out in this portfolio, it was very, very well received. And so I expect to have the same, if not stronger, relationship with the incoming administration, particularly with this interagency approach. So we had spent some time with OSTP. Obviously, it's going to be a whole new set of people there. We want to sit down with OSTP. And part of this, is that the challenges facing our country coming out of this pandemic and some of the, other needs, you can look at prescription drugs, totally not related to this portfolio. And, you get your newspaper every morning and what's on the front page. And look, we all know that this is, unless we really reach a boiling point or have some sort of major crisis, this is not going to be front page, but it is in people's news feeds, and people do pay attention to it. And I woke up to this truly when I was running for Congress and coming out of a research lab where it was a public-private partnership. I knew that was going to be the approach that we had to take for our recycling sector moving forward. And look at us here today. How productive is this conversation, this webinar, and coming out of this session today, and what we want to look at into the months ahead. So let's just say, Matt, we're going to start 2021 with a bang.
Well, that's good to hear. And you actually hit on a couple of questions that I was expecting to ask you about. Obviously, a dramatic difference in the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. With that comes, the interaction between Congress and the administration. I think you identified the EPA with their national recycling strategy that they've just come out with. I'm interested to see how you feel the interplay is the leadership going to come primarily from the Hill, or do you think that the incoming administration, I know you want to give them time to get their sea legs under them. But
Yeah.
we're certainly interested to know how big of a priority this is and the direction that they're interested in taking as well.
Yeah. And that's maybe something too with our plastic solutions task force where we do more cross-functional meetings like that. I'm an interesting member of Congress in light of this question because I worked in the Obama administration. I worked on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue. I worked in some of these agencies. I worked on some of these, interagency efforts in different areas than recycling. And so, in some respects, I've got an understanding and know what it's like to sit in those agencies. And now I know what it's like to sit on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue in the legislative role. And, you want to be respectful of the moral authority, the authority of Congress to authorize, to appropriate, to conduct oversight, to convene. I would say that the executive office has a stronger ability to convene than probably a member of Congress does. But when we come together, it's really, really something special. And so this is where, I'll be tasked, I know, with working with the White House Office of Legislative Affairs because they're going to be doing a lot of the outreach. And so we want to work with the existing channels, but also continue to forge the relationships with the incoming administration and then make them local. I really see a lot of opportunities for us getting out of Washington and getting into the field. This was a big goal of ours in 2020. A lot of it happened offline, or excuse me, it wasn't offline, it was online. It was online. Sometimes it was over conference calls and things like that. And then we also saw disruption to our plans, but we do want to get back into the field. We want to bring, and again, this is just the approach that I take as an elected official. When you say all of government, you can do state, local, and federal. And so I want to be able to take our federal partners, me as a member of Congress, with these agencies and bring them to Michigan, bring them to the table with my municipal leaders and my industry leaders. We'd love to have some national partners, wink, at the table on that. I think that would be very important for us. And that's really the goal. And so President gets sworn in late January, as we all know. Congress starts a couple weeks before, and we want to see who's in what positions. But what we also want to do is immediately have those conversations. And I'm going to tell you, I know how to be successful in this job, and it's really about being laser focused on a few things, right? I'm not going to hit them over the head with a laundry list of dozens of items. I'm going to say, here's something we're really working on. It's a really great opportunity. It's very localized. It's energizing to people. I mean, David asked the golden question, what's your reaction from your constituents? Well, it really is red meat. It is something that energizes people because they see the costs that come down to them as taxpayers, and they certainly also see that need for us to do things a little bit differently. And everyone in this new environment doesn't want to see the United States being reliant on any other country other than our own, right? I mean, obviously we know we live in a global economy, but heck, it's like, why aren't we creating this right here? I mean, we could start to look at the shipping costs too. And this is where I frankly think, and I'll stop here, Matt, because I know I'm giving you like a sermon, but frankly, this is where our industry partners too weighing in is going to be really exciting and instrumental.
Yeah, and you don't have to apologize. Nobody's here to listen to me talk, so they're here for you. But I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to kick it over to Ashley to go into some of the viewer questions. But I do want to ask you about one part of the bill. Your bill directs the Department of Energy to support integrated research, and I'm reading it verbatim to get it right.
Yeah.
Support integrated research, development, demonstration, and commercial application for chemical and bio-inspired plastic recycling. This is, of course, a big discussion point right now about the idea of being able to chemically or advanced recycled plastic so that it could get back into essentially virgin resin. And I think there are a lot of folks who've kind of identified that as an important part of any type of recycling strategy or goals. So you've obviously included it as a directive to the Department of Energy to research it, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the idea of chemical recycling or advanced recycling, however you want to describe it.
Well, one of the things that we haven't touched on today is cost. And we all know, and you guys are in the industry, I mean, we got low oil prices, we got cheap plastic, but every time I sit down with an industry partner in particular, they are eager to do this component, which is the convergent resin, and to get us back to a reused good, and that we've got to stop looking at plastics as just single use. And that's part of where we're missing the opportunity. I frankly think if we could compel the research, and this would be outside of Department of Energy, but if we could compel the research, we could also really make a very strong jobs case. Just across the board. I think that we can make a very, very strong jobs case. And another part of this is also in our STEM fields and in our research fields and the next generation of workforce. But part of why DOE is such an important partner to have at the table is partly because they are one of the agencies that's really responsible for conducting that early stage, 0 through 3 technology research that, everyone knows about DARPA, and then we've got ARPA-E, which also exists out of the Department of Energy. I don't know if this necessarily if ARPA-E would wrap their arms around this, but maybe they would for a potential technology or two. And then the other component is that we just want to take advantage of some of the existing assets at the Department of Energy. I've had the privilege of working with that agency in the past and in a cross-functional way when we were working on some of our industrial efforts about a decade ago. And there are some real assets there in addition to the human capital that I think will really yield the results. And also potentially, and again, this is maybe open for feedback from our outside partners, but also open up some of the channels for cost sharing, research collaboration. Again, when you start to look at who's doing early stage TR, the technology readiness level of 0 through 3, that's going to either be at a university or at a government level. When we bring this to the stage with private industry or even to our municipalities, and particularly to our municipalities, I mean, they're not going to have the bandwidth. I mean, we'll be lucky to get a couple of pilots off the ground, but I think we've got to look at costs and obviously also energy efficiency. And I am really bought into the thought that there's also got to be the research conducted on our materials applications to get it under better. I mean, you all might have some of the cost components on that I'd love to look at, but if we get the government involved as well, there might be some more ability for us to learn that, for instance, on our water bottles versus the steel bottles, and we look at the energy consumption, I am not convinced that we need to abandon plastic water bottles at all, and I'm just going to be honest about that. You're going to hear from many other people that just think, oh, the plastic water bottles, this and that, but it's what we're doing with them on the back end. So if we have, the government as a table setter, and not to overregulate, not to get anyone's hair, but to help bring everyone to the table together, particularly, and it's just a couple lines, Matt, in the legislation, I know that, with Department of Energy, and some of that is really quite intentional to give them the runway to do this research, but we're not going to just do it in the vacuum. So you match that with what we're doing on the Plastic Solutions Task Force, and then I'll just start to feel like I'm working in a research lab and not in Congress, and and there we go. So
well, depending on
that's my blue sky vision for you. There, you got it out of me.
That's good. Ashley, I think we've got a number of questions from viewers. You got one to toss out there to the Congresswoman? You may be on mute.
Sorry about that. So like I said, there's a lot coming in from the audience. One that came in, Representative Stevens, plays on, your passion around education. And it's not directly tied to your bill, but, our industry, as you're well aware, has been hampered by negative perception. And so there's a question that came in. Do you have any thoughts on how we educate our friends in Canada that plastic is not toxic?
Oh my goodness. No. I'm from Michigan. So, we got a very strong relationship with our allies and friends in Canada. And, if who's ever asked that question, if you wouldn't mind, if you have the ability to do so, either through Matt or Ashley, if you could follow up with my office, I'm actually very eager to have a deeper conversation about some of the recent actions from Canada around plastics. I would just be curious to see, I saw the ruling come down. I just thought, oh brother, because, again, I think that is just, it just creates, we look at, people get dramatic about what's going into the landfills, and then we've got, okay, it's going to be there for, millennia or whatever. And, I don't know if that's necessarily what motivated them. So I got to get a better understanding of what's going on. And if we've got, just some of the facts that come down. And look, diversity of material use is not a bad thing. Like I'm a member of Congress. I'm not here to serve one industry at all. And I don't, for instance, with cutlery, plastic cutlery, I don't like throwing out plastic cutlery, right? I mean, because I see it's like, well, why would we throw this out? Isn't there something else we could do with it? Should we reuse it? Shouldn't we recycle it? We don't even talk about that. We're possessed by, we tend to pick one thing. We look at the water bottle, the bottles, the straw situation. It's like, here you are drinking plastic cup with plastic lid. Matt and I've talked about this a dozen times, and but you got you have the non-plastic straw, which is, it's a paper straw. So I do think we need to get armed with the facts. I don't have a lot of people coming to me that Canada did this, we should do this, but we shouldn't be naive to think that day might arrive. And so let's bookmark this for, truly, I want to kind of sit down on this, and I've got a couple of files on it, but we definitely need to do a little bit more. And I think as it pertains to trade and some of the changing dynamics of the US-Canada relationship, transforming dynamics of the US-Canada relationship. Obviously in 2019, we signed a very historic trade deal. This is very, very worth diving into. And in particular, if you are a business and you have been impacted by this, I would like to learn more, which is why I'm asking for the follow-up.
Absolutely. I think that's perfectly fair. I have one more that I'd like to shoot in for the audience before we go back to Matt. So related to recycling goals, average recycling rate has been reported for plastics around 9%. EPA has recently come out with a total recycling goal of, the 50 by 30. Any thoughts or anything you want to expand on in terms of your reaction to goal setting?
Look, I actually think goals allow us to take a regular metrics-based approach. I mean, it's not like we're gonna, punish anyone if we don't meet a goal. But I've thought about the goal setting from the lens of how it compels day-to-day work, metrics-based, approaches, week over week, monthly based, look at things. It also sometimes, when you set goals like that, it forces you to forge new partnerships and new relationships. New business sometimes can come out of that. EPA setting a goal, that might be, for the germane partnerships that they have, I think are, public-private partnership type of goals, even things that, if you look at public-private, at the very local level, that could be very inspiring. I could see that coming out of some of the pilots that may or may not take place in the coming years, depending on, I'm sure different municipalities are going to be piloting things. In terms of what they actually look like, we'll see that mature. And look, I think that ultimately the goals are inspiring, and it's a call to action. And there's definitely the potential for good results.
Yeah, totally agree. So I'll turn it back to Matt for one final go round.
Yeah, well, and Congresswoman, again, thank you. I know we're running short on time. I want to say we will follow up with you on the designation of toxic from Canada. We had a very good conversation with the Department of Commerce and the U.S. Trade Rep this morning.
Great.
I think perfectly fits into providing you with what they're thinking and kind of what the next steps are. There's a comment period that's actually closing tomorrow, so we'll follow up right away with you. But
yeah, please just shoot us an email, Matt. That'd be great. Yeah. The other thing on that front too, again, I'm mentioning the Michigan component, but we've had a long problem with dumping from our friends from the, it's a big topic, Canadian trash. So in Michigan.
Well, coming close to the end of our hour, I think it's probably best to just open it up for your final remarks and anything. You've got a lot of folks from the industry on the call. Anything you want to deliver as a message to us, and things that we can do to be helpful.
Yeah, let's just continue to hum on the education front. This is a big takeaway for me for today as well. Just a reminder of how important it is to arm people with facts and knowledge. And some of this, as we all know, is going to be around public perception. This is going to be, that's how you get to public perception. And right, the reason why folks come to members of Congress is we help shape that. We absolutely do. And, I spend time even in the media talking about these things, which I think is really important. And that's another goal for next year, is to bring some attention to this, continue to do smart, applicable, realistic policy in this space. Not too concerned about some of the changes that we're going to see into 2021, but know that it's going to bring on some work. Just like you're saying, Matt, we're probably going to, we're going to, obviously, the last 3 weeks, I'm not getting this bill signed into law, so we're going to have to reintroduce it. And that the invitation to continue to partner and work together is just very strong. It's I feel pretty passionate about continuing to forge this relationship with our Plastic Solutions Task Force. We'd love to have you all continue to come to the table, the education component, as well as continuing to identify some other areas of opportunity and researchability.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Matt, David, Representative Stevens, for being with us today. I think we could have continued this conversation for probably another 2 hours to cover all of the questions that we got in from the audience, but we'll certainly send a copy of that to your office as part of our follow-up. So thank you for being a part of this today. Thanks to all the audience who joined and listened in. And, we're here at the association to continue to foster this type of dialogue between the plastics industry, the good work you're doing. You know, we want to share those stories with Representative Stevens and all of her colleagues. So we're glad that you all are part of this, and please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that we can do. Otherwise, you guys, everybody have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and this wraps up the Refocus webinar series for 2020. So happy holidays, and we'll see everybody again in 2021. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.